to one with Olha Yavorska. She's the Neurolanguage Coach, yeah, accredited. She's as well business English trainer, Delta 1 and 3 holder. So suppose now Olha will share her presentation and tell about her experience. So Olha, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Valeria, for this amazing introduction. I'm not sure if I can share my screen, but let me give it a go. And please let me know if you can see my presentation.
So downloading. So just to suppose we need a couple moments.
Yeah.
Okay.
What about now? Because I can see that I
Oh, yeah.
just
Now it's
shared my
okay.
screen.
Yeah, but we need just to make it full screen.
Yeah. Just
Uh-huh.
a second. I think I think it's thinking. Okay, is it full screen now?
Not yet. I see only the structure of PowerPoint presentation.
Okay, what about now?
Not yet.
Interesting, because it is on my screen. Just let me know when it is. In the meantime, I would like to say good afternoon to all of the participants and, of course, today's host. I hope you are all doing well and happy Vyshavanka Day. So I'm really glad that these two special events coincided, and it is a great day to be feeling proud to be Ukrainian, right? So welcome everyone. And of course, I want to begin by saying a genuine thank you to TESOL-Ukraine and to every single person behind the scenes, because you made this event possible and what you do really truly matters. As for the educators here, it is of course a huge privilege to be among you, to be among so many educators who care deeply about what they do, why they do it, and of course who they do it for, which is of course our learners. So I hope you will enjoy my talk. Anyways, all right. For those of you who don't know me, like Valeria said, I am a neurolanguage coach, ICF accredited, as well as a Delta certified ESP and business English tutor. So I help adult learners from Ukraine and abroad, as well as teacher learners to reach their linguistic goals through different coaching models. And these two qualifications, so the coaching one and Delta, they come from two different worlds, but they help me see a bigger picture of how learning is actually happening. And um, as an international speaker, I also love to share my ideas with the global audience, and that is why I've attended quite a bit of conferences as a speaker, and I highly encourage you to attend the upcoming one, which is LT-SIG by IATEFL Vietnam, which will be held on the 30th of May, all right? So as for the learners I work with, they are in my classroom not by chance, but by choice. So I work with students in ESP. These are professionals like builders, designers, engineers, business owners, etc., who need English not just as a skill, but they need it as an instrument to function, to defend themselves, right? To be taken seriously in rooms where important decisions are made. So my job is to help them do that. And more recently, my job has taken a turn because now I became deeply involved in coaching learners, not just in language, but in how to use AI instruments as a training instrument in order to promote their autonomy as well as agency, and just to create that environment outside of our sessions. Because as we might know, the best kind of learning is a 50-50, right? Which makes it 100 if they commit as passionately as tutors do. So today I want to share with you just that. It's not a promotion of technology of any kind. It's not a replacement of what we do as tutors, because that would be absolutely impossible. There is always a social element in what we are doing, that human connection. But as an extension tool for self-training, because self-training and self-practice is as important as everything else that's going on in the classroom. So I believe that this tool could be accessible and just able to promote autonomous output, which is so needed by our students right now. Right, but before I do that, I'd like to start off with quite a controversial question. So I know that it's too controversial to say just good or evil, but if you want to share your opinion in the chat box, sorry, then please do. Do you believe that AI is bringing good or evil into education? You can say either, or you can say complicated. You can provide your own arguments as you wish. So I'll give you a minute to think, and maybe we'll get some ideas in the chat here. Oh, I can see the chat now.
Yeah, and Ola, sorry for interrupting. Actually, I can't see the full screen presentation. Maybe we'll go just on slides and structure. Because
You can't see the slides I'm showing?
yeah, so not on the full screen. I just only see the structure and the first slide.
Oh, okay.
Technical problem. Maybe
Yeah, I
we'll
didn't
just
know that
go.
because it looks entirely different on my screen.
Yeah, I
So,
got this problem. I know, unfortunately.
just give me a second. So you see it just as a PowerPoint presentation with
Yeah,
the
yeah,
left
with
bar.
the structure. Yeah. So I suppose we'll go maybe in structure, like slide by slide, in this way.
Okay, then I'll try to
Uh-huh.
reshare my screen one more time, okay? And in the meantime, of course, please share your ideas.
Oh,
Okay.
cool. I can see it now full screen.
Whew, thank God. All right.
Super! You've done that.
All right. All right. So you can drop just one word. Good, evil, complicated, don't know, as you wish. A mix of both. That's true. Unfortunately, evil. Okay, good. I respect your opinion. Okay, any other ones? Evil. All right. All right, good. Good. I know how controversial this question can be, so yeah. All right, so you can sit back and just think about it, contemplate, because today's talk is not literally about AI. It's about basically every tool that lands on our doorstep and forces us to think and ask ourselves this question, like, does this serve our learner or does it actually diskill them? Does it build their agency, or maybe it creates dependence? Maybe it promotes their thinking, or maybe they just feel that they can throw something in and have something ready-made in a couple of seconds. One person says here, for good in good hands with right prompts. Yeah, and to that I would add with the right intent in mind, right? So if you intend to use it for the good, for the benefit of your learners, then of course you will get that very result. Right? And going back to what I was saying, so we asked this question when we saw the invention of the computer, right? And then I remember when Google was introduced, people were also baffled. They thought that it would negate any kind of thinking, right? But in the right hands, like Yarina is saying, people started discovering more. They could do research, access libraries, etc., etc. We asked this question about Google Translate, and people are still arguing about that, right? So today I'm not going to tell you whether it's good or evil, and you can form your own opinion. But what I am going to show you is a very specific, principled, and theoretically grounded use of AI that puts some oral training tool directly into the hands of our learners who can use it entirely outside of the classroom. And I will let you decide for yourself. Right, so as we know, especially those who work with adults like me, but not only teenagers and various age groups. So learners come to us these days primarily with one particular goal, right? And that is to speak, to communicate with their peers in their professional context, to share ideas, to advance in their workplace, etc., etc. So the skill they want to train is, of course, speaking. But unfortunately, and if you can see, yes. But unfortunately, data shows that the actual time allocated to that output practice, like role-playing potential scenarios, or just freer speaking practice, in group classes as small as just 5 students, it drops dramatically, right? With each having only around 10 minutes to train that skill. And if we talk about like larger classrooms, 15 to 20, that number is even smaller, right? It's around 2 minutes per student. And you can see the bar here, which says 48 for the individual class, although my take would also be that it's quite debatable. It's not always like that in a one-to-one environment. So when looking at that, before anyone says anything like, but we use pair work, group work, and all the communicative activities, yes, we do, and that helps. But even in the best designed communicative classroom, individual speaking output is not entirely trained to the extent that they want to, right? And it's not always, it doesn't always replicate what learners have to produce in real life scenarios. It does not cover it like the exact professional context in which they need to execute tasks efficiently in a foreign language. So now this, right, also overlaps with what has been quite overlooked by experts for decades, but remains to prevent adults from gaining that confidence and fluency to take advantage of their language in the professional setting, in professional goals. And that's the concept of foreign language anxiety, which I covered pretty extensively in some of my previous talks for TESOL as well. And again, here, I would like to turn to you and ask you whether you could maybe guess the percentage of students that are going through that, let's say, issue or experiencing FLA. Type in your numbers here in the chat box. 78. All right. Any other ideas? 75. Okay, very close. All right, any more guesses? Okay, so basically research tells us that approximately 63% of adult learners experience what Horowitz and Cope identified in 1986 as a FLA or FLCA, which stands for Foreign Language Classroom Anxiety. And that is not a minority, right? That's quite a big number. So for those of you wondering, like, whether it's something serious, it is. It's not just a vague nervousness. It's something much more profound than that. And it has 3 very specific components. So there is the communication apprehension, which is the fear of speaking in itself, right? There is the fear of negative evaluation, and that is when you are afraid of being judged by the teacher or even your peers. You just feel uncomfortable in that social setting. And that is, of course, the test anxiety, which is not directly related to tests, but just of the pressure of being constantly assessed. And all of that information really matters for our purpose today, because in a group classroom setting, all 3 of those anxiety types are present simultaneously, right? Every single lesson. And sometimes the learner who needs to talk the most, needs English for their professional setting, is the one who is silent. I used to be like that. I went through FLA as a student. And I actually dealt with students coming to me saying that they are terrified to talk to native speakers, they are terrified to express their opinion, and so on and so forth. So we have those compounding problems. There is first not enough speaking time, right? Especially for ESB, some particular professions, and the environment where our learners are sometimes hedging where to talk or not. they feel embarrassed to talk, because if you know that feeling when your identity is different in a different language, so you might be an excellent surgeon, for example, but when you start speaking in a foreign language, you simplify everything and you don't feel the same kind of expert that you are in your L1. And of course, the third problem, right, which is personal relevance, like how much of the actual speaking we can cover to replicate what they need to deal with in their personal settings, right, in real life scenarios. And this is that gap, right? This is what I want to talk about and address how we can fill it. I believe this is not a classroom problem, because my take is that teachers do everything in their power to make learning efficient. They go the extra mile to ensure their learners' efficiency and fluency. It's more of a self-effort and agency problem. And these two, of course, build fluency just as well as those classroom conditions that we usually talk about, right? So to understand why the three-stage AI usage I'm proposing works, we need to spend a moment with Meryl Swain. So in the 1980s, she was studying French immersion students in Canada. Maybe you've heard of that. These were children who had spent years being immersed in that comprehensible input that Krashen used to talk about. Listening, reading, absorbing the language, and trying to acquire it as soon as possible. So by that standard, their exposure to the language was absolutely exceptional. And yet, the ability to produce accurate, fluent French remained surprisingly underdeveloped. So her conclusion was very simple but revolutionary at the same time. She said that input is simply not enough. In her 1985 paper, she argued that comprehensible input alone is insufficient for full language acquisition, because when you listen, read, we just extract meaning using vocabulary, context, and guesswork without fully processing the grammatical structure of what we are hearing. And we kind of get the message without necessarily getting the language and how the language works overall. So when we speak, just for the sake of speaking, it's not enough. But when we are forced to produce everything in meaningful contexts, when we have to commit to a structure, choose a particular word we need in real time for a real situation, we have to complete sentences in real time. So in that moment of attempted production, something very important happens, and she called it the noticing function. So she wrote that learners notice a gap between what they want to say and then what they can say. And that gap kind of becomes the engine of acquisition, the driving force behind their learner. And she actually identified three functions of that output. So there is the noticing function, which is I try to speak and discover what I don't know. There is the hypothesis testing function. I attempt a form, I try it out, I get feedback, and I adjust my speaking. And then, of course, there is that meta-linguistic function, which is I reflect on what I said, I think about my way of thinking and expressing thoughts, and I consciously work out why it was right or wrong. Basically trying to acquire the language and understand how it works. And these three functions are actually the theoretical foundation of everything I'm about to show you. So because I'm not proposing a tech experiment, right? This is basically Swain's output hypothesis, but tailored to busy adult professionals outside the classroom, the ones who do not have enough time, the ones who have the classroom setting, but this is not enough for them, and the ones who want to be more autonomous because they are adults and they can put as much input into it as the classroom setting as well. So Swain was building on and responding to Krashen's input hypothesis, right? But the mistake was that input, of course, is sufficient on its own, which is not. And what our ESP learners need is not input or output. They need both in the right sequence, in the right context, and of course, the specific domain of their professional lives. So if we talk about, let's say, an electrician, yeah, they need to encounter a phrase like arc flash risk in the context before they are expected to produce it under pressure, before they can actually very different context around it, before they can ask a question with that particular phrase, and so on and so on, right? And that is why learners can reach for, let's say, more unconventional modes of practice, which is actually the 3-stage AI immersion. And the ones who were present at my Forward Festival talk have already heard about this instrument, and it is available on Google Gemini. It's their Google Gemini Video Multimodal AI. So it's the video mode. I'm not sure if it was designed for the blind, but I know that it's extensively used by the blind people because this mode can actually identify various types of objects. It can read environments. It can analyze documents, study all kinds of blueprints, examine texture, garments, inspect building details, and simultaneously provide the domain-specific language the learner needs to talk about those exact things. And that happens in real time at any hour with the infinite amount of patience and practice that our adult learners need. And what Heather was referring to, the high stakes, if you remember that. So here we have 0 social stakes because that last point matters. Remember, I mentioned those 3 anxiety components: the communication apprehension, the fear of negative evaluation, and of course the test anxiety. So here, that instrument can eliminate 2 of them really structurally. There is no human judge, there is no teacher, there is no grade, nobody is assessing you, so the pressure is off. And that affective filter, which Krashen also mentioned, and that blocks our acquisition, drops drastically. For those of you who know about this affective filter, it is directly linked to our memory. The higher the filter, the more difficult it is for us to retain all the words in our long-term memory. So stress is definitely connected to it. So basically, yes, when the filter drops, learning happens. So let me show you how it works in practice. The 3 stages mentioned here are, of course, real-time exposure. Then we have interaction and, of course, reflection. And each one maps directly onto Swain's 3 functions of output and could be powered by the technological era of our time. So stage 1 is real-time exposure, that kind of input that we are always talking about. But this is not passive input from a book or some random materials, because when it comes to ESP, usually people reach out to different kinds of articles and videos, so authentic materials, because there is just simply not enough in textbooks. So it is personalized, it is visual and domain-specific input that is generated from the learner's actual professional environment. And an example would be here. So let's take that electrician, Marco, right? He is a very experienced electrician. Right now, he is working on an industrial plant somewhere, let's say in Canada. And he has found a fault in a cable tray installation. He can see that problem clearly. He understands it completely in L1, right? But he simply cannot explain the intricate nature of that problem. So what he can do is open up that Gemini live video mode, point the camera at the fold, at what is happening right now, and describe what he sees in whatever level of English he has. So here is that brief dialogue. He says, the wire, it is touching the metal edge, and I think it can cause a fire. I don't know the word for this problem. And the input he gets instantly is, so what you are describing is called chafing. The cable is rubbing against the, I'm sorry, I can't see, the tray edge and damaging the insulation. The danger here is arc flash. The part that's missing is a conduit clamp. Without it, this is an unsupported cable run. So in that moment, in that minute, yeah, Marco is exposed to at least 5 pieces of domain-specific vocabulary that he needs to exactly explain what the problem is, either to somebody around him or maybe call his supervisor. So there is chafing, tray edge, insulation, conduit clamp, and so on. And it's not just from a random material. It's from his own building site, his own professional reality, which we would call in the classroom, right, Krashen's I+1 theory, but very personalized to his individual learning context in a way that is, yeah, well, no published material could ever be able to fill in. And another example, just for you to see, is from a completely different niche. So Anne is a seamstress, and she works in, let's say, a Paris atelier, and she is dealing with some kind of a problem with a bridal gown. And so she says, this part of the dress, it pulls, and she shows the action of how it pulls, right? The fabric is not flat, it goes to the side, and inside the hard part is too high, I think. So she is struggling to explain exactly what is going on in the accurate language. So she knows it in L1, but simply doesn't have the extent of the vocabulary to present it well in L2. And of course, the response from Gemini is, I can see the problem. The pulling in the fabric is called bias drag. It means the fabric is not caught on the straight grain. And then again, the seam that is curving instead of staying straight, that's called a twisted seam. These are the words that you need. And she instantly gets that comprehensible input. These were the words that she knew for 20 years, but had never ever used in English because she just didn't have the right context. So that would be the input. But then happens stage 2, and that is the interaction. It's not just about the words that you can acquire. It's also about how you can then produce them without any technological tools, well, with them and then without them in your professional settings. And just to draw on these 2 examples, what then can be done is, of course, where Swain hypothesis testing function activates, right? And these could be a multitude of role play scenarios that they can go through without any kind of anxiety or testing evaluation of any kind. So here for the electrician, we have reporting that fault to the site supervisor, explaining a delay to the project manager, handing over a completed installation to an inspector, safety briefing, etc., etc. So there is basically an infinite amount of the role play scenarios they can go through, again, get the input, provide the output, and then, of course, have the feedback needed and start noticing, so start applying that noticing function that she was talking about in order to fill the gap that they are trying to address. For N, the seamstress, it could be, of course, explaining the alterations to a nervous bride, right, at the first fitting. discussing fabric choice, handing over something to an inspector, handling a client with a complaint, just describing everything accurately, what is happening, what kind of problems they have with the fabric, etc., etc. So this is the output stage where they produce and notice. And of course, the element that cannot be taken out of this equation is stage 3, which is the reflection stage. And here, depending on the case, depending on our students', let's say, level and goal in mind, we could focus on various things like, for example, coherence and logical sequencing. Focus on hedging, whether there was a lot of hedging, whether there were fillers, so they start looking for fillers. They can analyze their professional lexis. So again, here focus on their range of vocabulary that they need to implement in speaking. They can also talk about discourse markers that they are missing. There might be, in many cases, a mismatch in register. They can focus on grammar mistakes, paraphrase everything. They can work on intonation, their pace, pausing, a lot of vague language that they could eliminate. A specific stuff, for example, analyzing all of the collocations, or if they work at international companies and international clients, of course, there is that politeness stage where there is a cultural mismatch, and being direct in Ukraine could be perceived as being a bit too rude in some other cultures and vice versa. So there is that element. And the metalinguistic function is here that students leave a paper trail, word for word, of everything they are saying, all of the responses they get, and afterwards it can be used as raw material with their tutors to analyze all of their mistakes, to go back and see what kind of gaps need to be filled, and how they could tailor the whole learning process in order for them to move successfully to another level. So actually, here I have a short video where I was testing this function, and I'm not sure if I can share it with you. It's just a couple of minutes long, but let me see if I could play it. It's not a 3-stage AI immersion, which I described in detail today, because I was just experimenting with it. What do you see on? Just give me a second. I was just experimenting with it, and basically it's a succession of various kinds of questions, analyzing objects. I was really curious about what it could identify, what kind of vocabulary input I could get from it, and whether or not these responses would be correct, basically. So please let me know if you can see a video here on my screen.
Yeah, we can.
Okay, what about the volume? I'm going to turn up the volume. Just a second. And please let me know if you can hear anything. Okay. Can you? What do you see on the table?
Yeah, everything's perfect.
On the table, I see a pair of scissors with red handles, a blue pen, and a gray smart pad.
Can you describe what this is?
I see a tall candle with colorful squares embedded in it, mostly white with green and yellow spots.
Sure, what to call that wire on top, like that little thing which sticks out. What is that?
That part is called a wick. It's usually a string or a cord running up the middle of a candle that you light to burn it.
What do you see now?
Now I see a 200 Ukrainian hryvnia note on the table. I mainly see the portrait on it. Is there anything specific you wanted me to notice?
Yeah, can you tell who that person is?
That's Lesia Ukrainka. She was a famous Ukrainian writer and poet. Anything specific you'd like to know about her?
No, thank you, but I would like you to read what's written here.
That's a quote from a poem. It says, "For truth, brothers, let's unite sincerely. We only have one right path." Gladly. It is, "За правду, браття, єднаймось щиро. Єдиний маєм правий шлях."
But one of the authors has written here.
Yeah, it looks like one of the authors, Richard, wrote a message that says, "Dear Olya, I hope you enjoy the book, Slava Ukraini." And then he signed it, Richard, with an X, which means a kiss. Slava Ukraini means glory to Ukraine.
Please tell me if you recognize this character.
I sure do. That looks like Steve from Minecraft, but in Lego form.
Can you tell me what tree this is?
That looks like a type of thuja, possibly an American arborvitae. They're popular for hedges and landscaping. Anything specific you wanted to know about it?
So is it a tuja or another name? Is there a difference between these two?
No, there's no difference. It's just that
I would like you to identify this flower. I'm not sure what to call it.
that's a common lawn daisy, also known as Bellis perennis. They're pretty distinctive with their white petals and yellow centers, aren't they? Are you wanting to know about any other part of the flower?
I'm not sure what to call this green long stick part.
That part is called the stem. It holds up the flower and carries water and nutrients to it.
Okay. Can you please read the note that I left here for my audience?
Of course. It says, AI can be a useful tool when it comes to language learning. Use it in moderation and with a good intention.
All right, so that's basically it. It was just me testing it out, so that's why the questions and objects were so random. But I would probably say that my core message for today is going back to the question I asked you, right? Is it good or evil? And I would say it depends entirely on the context you are using it in, and it depends on your intention. So you can be a biologist discovering something new. You can be an electrician, whether it's a seamstress or not. If used properly, if used with a good intention in mind, and for the purpose of learning, it can actually bring some efficient results. So drawing on that Merrill Swain's output hypothesis, I think it overlaps with what I have just mentioned. And yeah, I'm running a course, Upskilling with AI, so anyone interested, you could, of course, contact me afterwards. But that would be it. And if you have any questions, I would love to answer any of them.
Thank you, Olha. That was a really cool presentation, especially along the video that you have shared how you're testing the AI technology. Really, that's wonderful. I haven't even thought of this, that we can do. In this case, I really haven't known when you mentioned about the testing AI technology. Gemini is showing the fabrics, actually describing the kind of object. That was interesting. And you have tried this. That's magnificent.
Yes, I have tried it out, and it's really, really helpful if you want to delve more into specific topics that you just simply cannot see in textbooks or articles of any kind. Yes, the question is, what program did you use? It's a free Google Gemini live video mode. So you can just go to Google Gemini, and there is that video button which you press, and then it just acts like a camera, and you point it to any object that you want. And basically that's what I was saying. So if you are an electrician and you are dealing with a problem, you can just point a camera to it and get the specific input, the words, the vocabulary that you just lack in that particular moment. Any other questions? If not, thank you all for being here. Thank you for listening to my presentation. If you have any other questions, of course, you can reach out to me later after the conference.
Thank you one more time, Olga, for this wonderful presentation, of course, fruitful results that you have shared and how implemented into their learning process. As well, I suppose everyone got nice idea how to do this in our learning process. That was really cool. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and finally, we have one more speaker, Kenyon Whitehead. Virtual Educator Program Relo Kiev. So actually, Kenyon is an EAP ASP instructor specializing in education technology and authentic materials. So, Kenyon, you're welcome.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you so much for your warm welcome, Valeria. Let me take you through what I've got ready for us today. Hopefully this shows up all right. Just checking that you can see my PPT. Okay,
Yeah,
great.
we can see it full screen.
Fantastic. Virtual site visits is what I'd like to take you through. And this is using WebQuest to build tourism industry knowledge. Well, the general schedule today, obviously I want the bulk of this to be on the live demonstration of an isolated WebQuest, but I do of course want to take you through the rationale, the application, and the context in which it was used this past in the autumn term. And after the demonstration, we'll go through a bit of analysis on the questions and the structure and how it was designed before showing the broader classroom use and the context it was used in this particular instance. Of course, I'm going to give you some resources and links before giving you my references too. WebQuest, I suppose depending on how old you are, I do think of this as still relatively recent. Were created by Bernie Dodge from San Diego State University in 1995. They are basically a web-based structured activity in which participants will seek out and use information on a given website. What's great about them, honestly, is that they do develop critical thinking skills. Because these are real websites, they are authentic, they are motivating, and students can actually take the opportunity to instead of changing countries, instead of speaking to someone who is outside of your country, you have a real document there that can be interactive, that you can access from anywhere. Also, teacher side, you do not need to have any specialist knowledge. And this makes it extremely flexible. For this particular application, this was for English for tourism. In this case, because travel is so difficult in our context, this authentic website was a substitute for it. Another aspect of this, again, English for tourism, is that the Lexis is going to emerge naturally. And also, because these students are planning on being in the tourism industry in a few years, this also allows them the chance to gain a bit of confidence, to see that both what they're learning is valid, but that they have an application for it in the future. For me, last term, I was with OM Beketov National University of the Urban Economy with Relo Kiev. These were first-year students in the tourism, hotel, and restaurant business. The textbook was on the general topic, and this particular unit in the textbook was focusing on tourism in the UK. Because of that, in order to liven it up a little bit, I found some authentic websites, and the way we approached it was as group work. So each group, I think that it was groups of 3 or 4 at the time, shared an online document. At the time, I believe I was using Teams, but I have moved it today into Google. where students can divide up the work, can see how each other, how they're doing with it, if they're having any problems. And then at the end of it, after all the questions have been answered, the groups can teach the class about their location, about their site. What I will take you through is this live demonstration on Google Drive. I will first put the link into chat, of course, but we will navigate the authentic website, answer some scaffolded questions, discover vocabulary in context, and then another bonus is how, based on how your web quest is structured, you'll be progressing from something quite mechanical, from fact-finding, all the way through to analysis. Again, this is going to be one group activity in isolation. There's a larger class activity further along. So let me take you to the link that I just shared with you. I'm going to actually, hopefully this works. I have marked it. The one that I'm going to be working off of is Roman baths, but I have made 3 other ones, 1.2, 1.3, and 1.4. You should all have some edit access for this. So if you do want to mess around with them, answer the questions as we go, that is entirely possible. Sorry. Roman baths, the first bit I want to look at the base. This was the web quest that students were using. Basically, a lot of this is, you'll notice I do have a number of screenshots. And part of this was, again, these are first-year students who may need a bit more visual cues. This, as far as I knew, was their first web quest. The instructions take you through. I've tried to make it not too jarring. So the initial screenshot is exactly from the website, the Roman baths, and you can flip back and forth between them. Instructions: visit the website, find the answers to these questions. But there's another aspect to this that I want to make sure students are aware of, that they need to keep track of new and important tourism vocabulary, so any kind of topical vocabulary, with the idea that not just mining for the vocabulary, but they will use these words later in their presentation. These first few questions, I've tried to do it sort of in terms of how a natural visitor would look at it. So in terms of, if I were going to visit the Roman baths, I would be interested in when it was open, how to get there, these sorts of information finding questions. Then the other aspect of this, because students can get lost and students can get frustrated, is making sure that they can navigate on their own. So for me, and what works, I think, quite effectively, is marking out with extra boxes where specifically to click. It may not be enough for all students to say, click on visit and then plan your visit. It can be quite useful to make sure that it is highlighted in some way. There, continuing along, again, I tried to color code certain things. I know this is not necessarily perhaps the most user-friendly, but the idea that it may stand out, that how far is it? Tell me about the section by train. Similarly, we've got situations like visit and restaurant. And there start to be the questions start to be a little bit more complex. Instead of the ones that you would normally perhaps ask as a guest, it could be, in fact, how long has the Georgian pump room been open? A bit more of exploration. Scroll to water's fountain. What kinds of water comes out? These may not be the ones that would be initially of interest to the normal visitor. But this also would be something that perhaps a tour operator would need to know, or someone in the tourism industry might find helpful to look for. Continuing on, visitor FAQs. Then things that might be relevant to these particular students. So again, I'm trying to make a balance between an authentic visitor, someone in the tourism industry, and these particular individuals. Can foreign students, these students that I'm working with now, can they use their student card? As you continue, the questions do start to change. So further along, number 11, it asks for key items. Then you've got some sort of opinion. Which one of these would you like to see the most and why? Again, everything is fairly scaffolded with highlighting for where you need to click. Additionally, broader context. There's a question of other things to do in Bath. And this allows students not only to decide where this is, figure out what is nearby, but also, again, use their own judgment, decide which one would you like to see most, and then ask why. The final bit of analysis is this question: why do you think the Roman baths are a popular tourist site in the UK? Should bring a lot of these together. The idea that certain things are special. For example, the collection has some special items. Water for your health. These, and of course, as they're clicking through, you do see these absolutely fantastic photographs of an absolutely beautiful location. I mentioned also the idea of vocabulary mining. So further down, I've put in a few examples where obviously I don't want them to come up with all of the vocabulary that they may discover, but certain ones that perhaps could be useful in their context. Chandelier and part of speech, meaning, but then also a section that gives a bit of context. So this could be the link. This is always useful. It could be a screenshot. So for example, for pediment, this is not a common word, but for someone in the tourism industry, especially someone who is doing things on ancient Greek or Roman styles, pediment would be quite a useful word. This screenshot, I think, is an effective way of displaying this. In terms of chandelier, there are no appropriate photos necessarily on that page, but the context in which it is written is really quite useful. Those are the main tasks for their discovery. The meat of the lesson then, once they have answered these questions and they've had this thorough explanation or thorough chance to explore the website, here is what I'm trying to prime them for. Your group is going to teach the class about Roman baths in a 3 to 4 minute presentation. There's a list of things that they can include, or they should include, excuse me, why tourists visit the site, things the visitors need to know. I say 3, but of course that can be scaled up or down. I honestly enjoy questions like this one, a surprising or interesting fact. This really allows the student to reflect on perhaps their expectations and reality. The other part of this, your group's recommendation. One potential danger is that students divide up the questions and they don't look at each other's answers for each of them in a group presentation. But trying to encourage a bit of group work. Is this worth visiting according to your group? Why or why not? Finally, another useful part of this is to teach the terms to the class. This is almost a ready-made sort of vocabulary up here just above the task. Teach them to the class, but of course, an additional item of this would be explain why they are important, and perhaps even important to this site in particular. let me take you back to my PPT just a second, because I do want to go a bit more into So the tasks that were chosen and why they were chosen. So as I mentioned, the beginning ones are very much what a normal visitor would look like, would look for, excuse me, orientation, how to navigate to this place, how to locate it. Then it starts to go a bit more into an investigation about what this site offers. So understanding the services, the features, what is available at this place. There's an element of evaluation. So you must express your preferences. Not so this takes us from a bit of a passivity to a bit more active, especially with the idea of why. Please justify which of these things in the gallery you would like to explore. And finally, this analysis and synthesis that I feel allows them to take it, instead of just a reading project, into something a bit more. And as I mentioned, the vocabulary mining, ideally, they would be able to scroll up and down as they go and stick the vocabulary in there. This brings me to the broader, before that, there is, of course, one of the reasons I love WebQuest is that it gives you so many chances to differentiate. So how much do you want to lead them down the garden path? How direct do your instruction needs to be, or can you allow them a bit more freedom? Can you be quite, look here, give a photo, press this button, give a photo, or how much can you trust them to be a bit more patient with themselves? Another aspect is, of course, the questions. What sort of questions? Certain texts will lend themselves to certain ones, but also you can make them a much more challenging. This is very much a valuable freedom I've found. For example, to scale it down, to make it a bit easier, you could have sentence starters. You could have gap fills. There could be a vocabulary treasure hunt, where you have certain words that you have students find in context, and the students can then decide part of speech, meaning. It could be multiple choice. It could be, gosh, I feel like possibilities are almost endless. An additional factor that is great, depending on your level, is that there are, of course, websites designed for children that can be used. So not just at the higher education level where you're looking for vocabulary, but ones perhaps designed by the BBC or PBS for children, or National Geographic Kids is another fantastic option. This takes me then to the broader classroom use. Now, I showed you just now one web quest in isolation, and that was on the Roman baths. For this particular lesson, we actually had 4 groups, and each group had a site from each of the 4 nations. So Roman baths in England, Balmoral Castle in Scotland, Portmeirion in Wales, and Giant's Causeway in Northern Ireland. You will see in the second part of the Google Drive, I have labeled 2 the broader classroom use jigsaw tasks. I've got the other options. So if I open each of those, you'll see, again, I've tried to excuse me, don't want to make you sick. Bremen Bass, the first one. Second one, Portmeirion in this list. This is the Welsh version. Again, with as much scaffolding as I think the students may need. Balmoral Castle in Scotland. Giant's Causeway. These are all quite different as well, which another thing that I thought might spark a bit more interest. Giant's Causeway being something natural, Balmoral Castle being something royal, and Port Marion being an architectural wonder, in addition to the site of the television show The Prisoner. As the students listen, one danger, of course, is that they start to zone out while the other groups are presenting. One task that I found quite useful is to ask them to take notes. So here is one possibility where, as the groups present, take notes on their destination. What is it? Why tourists visit? What are some facts about it? And again, because one of our goals is useful vocabulary, that we can have a section on that as well. That useful vocabulary that may come up, and students, of course, can be selective with that. A final bit as well, because there are going to be these 4 different groups, it's nice to wrap up and to allow them to say, which destination would you most like to visit? If you want to be particularly forcing them to pay attention, which destination besides your own would you like to visit? To try and force them into paying a bit more attention, and why. And then there's a bit of analysis that might be useful for again to activate what they've got going. They have these resources now. They've been listening. They have an idea of 4 very different locations, but they are also all heritage sites. What makes them attractive to tourists? What connections can be drawn between these? What makes them appealing? Then what I've chosen as I close out, sorry if that seemed a bit fast. I wanted to make sure that we finish on time. A child-friendly website. There's a couple of options here. Glenfield School gives some lovely ones as an option. I'll show you those briefly. Save the Children also offers some really good ones. Again, sorry, share. So Glenfield Infant School offers some general sites like BBC Bite Size, Fun Brain, Primary Games. It even offers the idea of Google Earth, which is a wonderful way to if you try and find your house and find things nearby. It also separates them, doesn't it, into things like math and science, depending on what options you're after. These are the images, or sorry, these are from Save the Children, things like Sesame Street and PBS Kids, and then elementary school children at home learning resources as well. The other point that I wanted to make sure that was available to you, it turns out that they are redoing the WebQuest, the original WebQuest setting from the pioneer of WebQuest. So I cannot, in good conscience, give you that link because it is still under construction. But Education World offers some great advice on ways to construct your WebQuest. And then also on Medium, Raya, excuse me, gives you a bit more information as WebQuest, specifically talking about it from a constructionist approach. So these are 2 more that I happen to think are quite useful. I will be uploading this slideshow onto my Google Drive that you have access to already for you to look through and mine for whatever you feel is necessary. References, the Roman Baths, again, was taken from romanbaths.co.uk. The WebQuest in teaching information literacy was taken from Cambridge, and then there was teachingenglish.org.uk has a useful website on the British Council teaching English. Any questions? I am always available at my email or LinkedIn should you wish to contact me. But questions, comments, thoughts, I would love to hear them.
Thank you, Kenyon. I'm really in love how you demonstrated all this, and of course, I'm really grateful for sharing the Google source that you shown us.